رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For these past 5 or 6 days, we've been discussing this topic of illness and death and what comes beyond. We've looked at the recommendation in the Sunnah to remember death often. We looked into the ahadith about illness that leads up to death and some of the things that go on behind the scenes that we don't recognize and realize. And then we looked at the sakaratul maut, the throes of death that a person experiences at the time of the taking of the soul. And we also looked at some of the things that mitigate that pain and suffering that we can do while we live and that those around us can do at the side of our bed. There's one last stage or one last thing that we need to talk about before we go into the barzakh, into the life after this life. And that is, I think, a very troubling prospect, and that is that it is possible to turn away from faith at the last moment. So this is referenced in ahadith as al-adila inda al-maut. Adl, udul means to turn away from something. We know adl as justice. That's one root, one meaning of that root. Adl and udul also mean to turn away. And so al-adila and al-maut is a reality that we have to be aware of, and we have to do everything we can while we still live, while we have the strength of our intellect and our abilities, to strengthen our faith to the point that we are not subject to such a devastating turn at the last moment. So first of all, let's look at the idea that faith is something that is potentially transient. We shouldn't ever think of it as something that is a done deal. I'm a believer and that's it. I can move on to something else because those bases are covered and I don't have to worry about my faith. We always need to worry about our faith, and we need to be engaged in strengthening it. And if we are not careful with that and we let doubts creep in, we let uncertainty creep in unaddressed, then our faith is always brittle and it's very easy to crumble. The slightest doubt, the slightest objection, the slightest controversy can shake us and we can lose everything. I'll share one hadith from Kitab al-Kafi, and this is from Imam it's from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And he speaks about the transience of faith. He says, "Inna al-abda yusbihu mu'minan wa yumsi kafira." It's possible for a person to wake up a believer and enter into the evening kafir. Wa yusbihu kafira wa yumsi mu'minan. The opposite is also possible. You wake up in the morning kafir, and by the end of the day you found faith and you become mu'min. Wa qawmun yu'aruna al-iman thumma yuslabuna. So one of the phrases that's used in a hadith to refer to the brittle nature of some people's faith is that it's like an ariya. In Islamic law, ariya is a loan. If I lend you my bicycle, right? If I lend you my car, this is ariya, and it's not yours. I'm not transferring ownership to you. It still belongs to me. It's in your possession temporarily, but it will soon leave. You'll have to return it to me. And so faith is also referred to like this. Not all faith, not everyone's faith, but there are some people who are qawmun mu'arun, people whose faith is on loan. They are believers, but belief has not yet found root inside of them. It's not solid, it's not yaqeen, it's not unshakable. It's not fully theirs. They haven't taken ownership of it yet. It's still on loan. ثُمَّ يُسْلَبُونَهُ. And just like that car that was mine and I lent it to you, at some point I'm going to come asking for it, I'm going to take it back. So some people's faith is also like that. It's given to them and they use it for a while and it serves some purpose, but at some point it might be taken back. Either at the time of death or even sometimes during tragedy in life. Things happen where people are so overwhelmed and they don't have the wherewithal to deal with that tragedy, and they sometimes lose their faith. They say, how could God do something like this to me? I did everything He asked and now He's caused this death, this sickness, this loss. What kind of a God is this? And they throw their hands up and say, I don't want this God anymore. I don't believe anymore. Well, no, God couldn't do something like this. And that crisis can lead to the person losing their faith. So this is something, we don't want our faith to be on ariya. We want to have ownership of it. And this requires work. A lot of times we are born into the faith, and our parents raise us in that faith. And that faith, as long as we're under their care, tends to be like that. It tends to be something that's really just a factor of them. If I had been born in a different family, I would follow that family's religion. So sometimes our faith is just a factor of circumstance. Allah blessed me to put me into a believing family, and so I happen to be a believer. But am I such a critical and such a studious and such a thoughtful person that I engage with my faith such that if I had been born in a different environment, in a different family, I would have been seeking truth and I would have found the truth? Or it's only because I happen to be born in the family that follows the truth that I happen to have the truth? So is my faith circumstantial? Or is it really something that I have striven for and I have found and I have developed, I have strengthened, and I'm constantly taken care of? It must be nurtured. And so one indication, one thing to diagnose ourselves is think about how much you engage with faith matters. With faith, I'm talking about aqeedah in particular. That's the main, the foundation. We call it usul ad-din for a reason. Usul are roots of a tree. So these are the cornerstones of our faith. Belief in reality, even that I think sometimes you don't make that connection. When we say we believe in something, sometimes we talk about it as though we believe in unicorns and fairies. The same way another person might talk about that. We also might talk about, well, we believe that there's one God. Well, at some point I need to move beyond saying I believe that there's one God to saying there is one God. The reason why we're called on to believe these things is because they're true, they're facts. It shouldn't just be something that I talk about subjectively, that in my opinion, I think what I've been taught according to my tradition, this is the language of someone who's mu'ar, someone whose faith is on loan. I haven't yet taken ownership of it. I don't yet know it for a fact. I can't say that I believe, meaning I have certainty. I have conviction that this is true. I know it's true, it's a fact, and I'm committed to it. Iman should be, I'm committed to this fact. Not that I have no evidence, there's no reason, but I've just decided that I'm going to accept this as true with no basis. That's not Iman, that's not yaqeen. So to have that, to get that, it takes work, it takes thought, it takes reflection, it takes reading, it takes classes, it takes discussion. And it's also not something that is ever settled. It's never a done deal. The nature of learning, and especially learning about something so vast as Allah Himself, for instance, is that nobody can possibly comprehend Allah. The path to get to know Him better and to be closer to Him is infinite. And so everyone is on this path somewhere. Well, either they're off the path altogether, but everyone who's on the path is somewhere along this path of trying to get to know Him better, developing a better relationship with Him, having those roots of certainty. And there are always questions that arise. What you have been taught, you might accept it for some time, and then at some point it's called into question. Either a doubt arises in your own mind, it could be a satanic doubt, waswasa of shaitan that he's put in your mind, or just your own curiosity, or it's from outside. Somebody else raises something, you interact with somebody else raises a doubt, you hear about something and you realize, I don't have an answer to that. I never thought about it like that. That changes things. Now what do I say? If this is true, then what? So those kinds of doubts, it's a double-edged sword. Those doubts and questions are wonderful if you are actively engaged with them. And you say, yeah, this is a very important point. I see the credit, like how it changes things. Let me figure this out. Let me go ask, let me go read, let me ask people who know more and see if they can guide me through this new doubt and come out the other end with a greater certainty than I started with. That's the way to engage with it. But if you don't, then the other edge of the sword is that it can cut your faith. If you leave it unanswered, then, oh yeah, that's one more doubt. Kind of put it under the rug and store it away, and you don't deal with it. Yeah, eventually, you end up with lots and lots of doubts, and then it's overwhelming. Right? With anything like that, any sort of housekeeping, if you don't do it regularly, eventually it becomes too overwhelming, and then even starting the whole process is too much because there's too much to deal with. And with something as critical as this, your faith can be so weak and eroded that not only are you not going to deal with those things, you just assume that, well, if there are so many questions I have, so many problems that I have with my faith, then how important can it really be? How much do I really know any of this stuff? And then eventually it becomes sidelined. Maybe even you turn against it and say, I don't need any of this. And you lose it. So we should be very much active, and this is across the board, all of us, at all ages and all stages of life. Even scholars and people who are seriously studying the deen we're constantly going through this on a daily basis. We read something new, learn something new, a new opinion about something, and we have to figure out, what do I do with this? How does this factor into everything else I know? Is it true? Is it false? What's the reason? It's a constant process. So if it's like that for people who are at a more serious level of learning, then definitely it's going to be there for someone who's not fully engaged in it. Yeah, so that's something we have to think about and worry about. And again, we can diagnose ourselves. We don't have to say, well, who knows if I'm one of those mu'areen, one of those people whose faith is on loan. I'll find out at the last moment. On my deathbed, then I'll figure it out. Right? Nothing is actually, the irony of the way we deal with deen sometimes is that those things that are fully in our control, we say, inshallah, Allah will take care of it. Allah is merciful, Allah is kareem. And we kind of just throw our hands up and say, Allah will take care of it. And those are the things that we're not supposed to give over to Him. We're supposed to take care of ourselves and engage and work and do all the work to prove ourselves to Him and to benefit from His grace, but we have to do the work. And those things that are totally guaranteed by Allah, and there's no question about it, those are the things we spend all of our time and energy pursuing, like our dunyawi sustenance. It's guaranteed. All I have to do is unlock the doors by doing the requisite work and spending the requisite time to make my living. But we'll sometimes end up putting all of our energy into procuring a living, and we leave no time for these important things which we're supposed to be dealing with. When this is guaranteed, that's not guaranteed. Faith is not guaranteed. Faith is something you have to work for. Sustenance is guaranteed. You don't have to work for it. I mean, you don't have to spend all your time working for it. Again, you have to work. It's called ijmal fi talab, is the term that's used in ahadith. Right? Seek your sustenance in a moderate way. Allah doesn't expect us to spend all hours and all our energy and everything seeking sustenance. You're not going to get any more when you get to the critical level of how much you should be working for getting your sustenance, and now you work more and more and more. There's no linear correlation to how much you're getting. Your sustenance is guaranteed, it's apportioned, and all you can do is unlock it, but you can't get more and more and more. You only get what you're apportioned. So now the rest of it's just a waste of time. That's a waste of energy doing something that's fruitless. when I should be putting all that time and energy into things that are fruitful, and let this take care of itself with only the requisite amount of effort. One example that is repeatedly given in the ahadith for someone who was mu'ar, that we all know of from history, is Zubair ibn al-Awwam. And Talha would also fit, but Zubair is mentioned over and over again in the ahadith. So for instance, in this one hadith from probably from the fifth Imam, Imam Baqir alayhi salam. So this hadith is attributed to him. Inna Zubair ikhtarata sayfahu yawma qubida an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa qala la aghmiduhu hatta ubayi'a li aliyin. Zubair was one of those people who had been a very solid companion of Rasulullah, and the hadith says that on the day when Rasulullah passed away, he brought his sword out and he said, I'm not going to sheathe my sword until the bay'ah for Imam Ali is complete. Until I can give my bay'ah to him, I'm not going to sheathe my sword again. I'm on the warpath. ثم اخترط سيفه فضارب عليا. And fast forward 25 years, 26 years to the Battle of Jamal, and now he unsheathes that same sword against Ali and fights him, and dies in the process of fighting against Imam Ali alayhi salam. Right, so someone to fall that much, from that level of closeness to the Prophet, one of the very, very dedicated companions of the Prophet, a cousin of Rasulullah, right? His mother is the chachi, the amma of Rasulullah, Safiya. And someone who is, laying his life down, one of the devotees of Rasulullah, and then one of the devotees of Imam Ali alayhi salam. After Saqifa, he's one of the very few companions who remains devoted to Amir al-Mu'mineen and says, I'm not going to give bay'ah to anyone except you. I'm ready to lay down my life for you. You give the word and we'll go out fighting. And not just one day, not in 2 days, 25 years by the side of Imam Ali as his faithful companion during the khilafah of the other three. And when he's tested now, he feels like something comes into his mind where he starts to say that, when do I get paid back for all my loyalty? You owe me something. I've devoted myself to you, I've sacrificed myself to you, I've given up the dunya for your sake. Now it's my turn to reap the benefits of my loyalty to you, so where's mine? And that's his downfall. When he makes that kind of demand of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali doesn't play that kind of a game. He doesn't give favor to people if they're not qualified, if not worthy. If he sees that kind of attitude in them, he's not going to give them big responsibility over so many things, over money and military and all of these critical positions. And so he says no. And so Talha and Zubair both, they launch their revolution. They go to Mecca and gather a force together, then go to Basra and launch a war against Imam Ali alayhi salam. So that's a cautionary tale for us. Someone like Zubair, with that level of faith, if he can lose it, then we shouldn't feel so confident. Unless we are doing work and we're engaged and we're making sure that on a daily basis we're nurturing this faith within us. Iblis is another constant cautionary tale for us. The same kind of very, very high status, very devoted servant of God, worshipping Allah. Imam Ali says he did sajda for 6,000 years. I don't know if it's years of this world or some other world. Sajda, just one sajda for 6,000 years Iblis did. That kind of devotion to rise to the level of the angels and then to have such a precipitous fall, and now to be the first into hellfire and the cause of all misguidance of Bani Adam, right? That's another cautionary tale. His faith was also very solid, but then he didn't take care of it, and he let arrogance get the better of him, and he lost everything. So that's the thing we have to worry about. Our faith, something we have to work on and be diligent with so that we don't lose it at the end. Now, there are some du'as also that are recommended for strengthening our faith, and particularly for guarding against al-adila and al-maut. Adila, again, is that udul, that swerving away from faith at the last minute, at the time of death. But sometimes I think we make a mistake in these du'as. We think, if I have the du'a, then I'm safe. It's a magic spell. Right? I just have to recite the du'a 3 times a day, and then no problems. Right? Du'as don't work like that. That's not how du'as are intended. They're not magic spells. They don't cure everything else. They don't do what they're supposed to do just like that. They're just magic words. You say them and now you're done. The du'a is there to make our connection with Allah, to help us to focus on certain ideas that are mentioned in the du'a. So that means we have to understand the du'a, think about it, understand it, speak it, own those words, now speak it to Allah. And then keep that connection alive. Like that becomes a new connection, a new inspiration, a new way for me to engage in a way that will, yes, it'll lead to this, blessing or this protection or whatever is being promoted and promised. But it's not magical. It requires, again, diligent work. There's no easy way to it. Yeah, there's no easy way. The reward is so high. Then the work that we have to do to get that reward is also very, very high. So one of the du'as is very straightforward. This is from Imam Kadhim alayhi salam. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-adilati 'inda al-maut. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from swerving away from faith at the time of death. And then he goes on to some other stages which we'll be talking about. What min sharr al-marji'i fil qubur. I don't want to enter into my grave and see that it's a terrible place to go. So I have to go into my grave. I don't want it to be hufratun min hufar al-niran, a pit from the pits of hellfire. I want it to be rawdatun min riyad al-jannah. So I seek protection in you from letting my grave be that pit of hellfire. Wa min al-nadamati yawm al-qiyamah. And worst of all, I don't want to have regret on the Day of Judgment. Allahumma inni as'aluka 'ishatan hani'a wa mitatan sawiyya wa munqalaban karima ghayra mukhsir wa la fadih. So we make a but the first phrase is very literally seeking protection from Allah from this adila, from turning away from faith at the time of death. Another dua is it's the one I recited in Isha prayer. It's in Mafatih al-Jalan as well, and it's a great dua to incorporate into your daily prayers, either as taqibat or as qunut. This is actually a really great practice. What I've done is maybe 20 years ago, maybe more than that. Whenever I started in the Hawza, as I started learning about different du'as, I memorized them. Some of them are really, really comprehensive and really powerful. And so I just incorporated them into my daily practice. So every Fajr I say Allahumma kulli waliyyak, for instance. Every Dhuhr I say one particular dua. Every Asr I say one particular dua. So I've handpicked several duas that personally I feel really connected to, and I feel like these are really good comprehensive duas. And I say those every day. So this Raditu billahi Rabban is the one I say for Dhuhr every day. So that's just my own personal practice. That's where I've incorporated it into my life. You can figure out how to do it in your life. But this is a great dua to recite. And it basically is stating our faith, right? What are the things I believe in? Raditu billahi Rabban. So actually, let me read the introduction too. So this person comes to Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ إِنَّ شِيعَتَكَ تَقُولُ إِنَّ الْإِيمَانَ مُسْتَقَرٌّ وَمُسْتَوْدَعٌ فَعَلِّمْنِي شَيْئًا إِذَا أَنَا قُلْتُهُ اسْتَقْبَلْتُ الْإِيمَانَ. And this person comes to Imam Kadhim alayhi salam and says that I'm hearing from the companion, I hear the talk, is that faith is mustaqar and mustawda'. This is referring to a verse from the Quran, وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُمْ مِنْ نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ فَمُسْتَقَرٌّ وَمُسْتَوْدَعٌ. There's another, actually Allama Tabatabai says that the qira'ah that he favors and thinks is better and actually makes more sense also is فَمُسْتَقِرٌ وَمُسْتَوْدَعٌ. So what the verse is talking about is that Allah has created all of us from that one nafs, from Adam alayhi salam, and we're all descendants of him. And so now there are some of us who are already stationed on earth. We've already been born and we're stationed on earth. Mustaqir means that they're in a place, stationed. Well, mustawda, and some of us are yet to come. All of us are Bani Adam. Some of us have already been born. Some are yet to be born. They're still, kind of on layaway in their mothers, in the wombs of their mothers, and over time they will be born. فَمُسْتَقِرٌ وَمُسْتَوْدَعٌ. So that's the verse that's talking about creation and the progeny of Adam alayhi salam coming forth. But the Imams have repeatedly used the same vocabulary to refer to this idea of ariyah that we talked about at the beginning. That some people's faith is mustaqir, it's solid, it's firmly rooted in their soul. And some people's faith is mustawda, it's a wadi'a, it's been given to them on loan, and it will be taken back when either they misuse it or at some time. So this person recognized that. He says that I'm hearing so many ahadith from your companions that they're saying that faith is like this, mustaqir, mustawda. Teach me something, he says, that will ensure that my faith is mustaqir, that I can be sure that my faith is well rooted and solid. So then the Imam teaches him this dua. He says, after each faridah prayer, say the following: Raditu billahi rabban, wa bi Muhammadin nabiyya, wa bil Islami dinan, wa bil Qur'ani kitaban, wa bil Ka'bati qiblatan. So say, I'm content, I accept all of these things. I accept God as my Lord. I accept Rasulullah as my Prophet. I accept Islam as my deen, Qur'an as my kitab, and the Kaaba as my qibla. And then one by one through the Imams, bi'aliyin, waliyan wa imama, wa bil Hasani wal Husayn, wal a'imma, salawatullahi alayhim. And then Allahumma inni raditu bihim a'imma. Allah, I'm satisfied with all of these as my Imams. Fardani lahum. I am satisfied with them, make me satisfying to them. Raditu bihim, fardani lahum. I'm happy with them, let them be happy with me. That's the harder part. Us being happy with them, that's not too difficult. Because it's very easy to love them. There's nothing not to love in them. But we're the mixed bag. We're the ones who are not so lovable. If someone knows our soul, then they see that there are many aspects of each of us that are not lovable. And to make ourselves lovable to the Imam is something very challenging. We're praying to Allah to help us. But again, the dua doesn't do it. Just because I said the dua doesn't mean that now automatically the Imam is radi with me, that he's satisfied with me, or God's satisfied with me. I'm on the right path because now I have my aspiration clear. I know what my goal is. I need to be pleasing to the Imam. Right? So now that's my goal. Now my life struggle is to figure out how do I do that. I've still got to do the work. Very least I've got to be in the right camp. I've got to do my best to learn about them, to obey their teachings, to not go against what they say. That's where it starts. And the more I can do that, then the more likable I am, the more they can be pleased with me because I'm pleasing to them. But I've got to get on that path. At the end we say, إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. We tap into Allah's omnipotence because that's what it takes. For someone like me to be pleasing to the Imam, I need Allah's omnipotence in my corner to make what is impossible for me on my own to happen. And then one last dua that we have for this is the one I recited from Surah Ali Imran, the bottom of the first page. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. So our hearts, alhamdulillah, if we're on Sirat Mustaqim, if we're guided, wonderful. But again, this is not something that's a sealed affair. And one of the reasons why we keep praying for Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, guide me, continue to guide me. We want to stay on this path. Staying on the path is very, very difficult. The path is very narrow, it's very precarious. it's not so easy to stay on it. And so we're constantly praying to Allah to guide us. And this dua is praying against the opposite. Don't let our hearts swerve. Don't let them veer now that you've guided us. Right, one of the hadith, Imam Kadhim praises people. He says there's some people who are very, very wise. They have very, very strong intellects. They're very wise. And what they recognize is exactly this, that hearts their guidance is not something that's guaranteed. And so he praises them for reciting this dua because they recognize that their guidance up to now is not an indication that automatically they're going to be guided from now on. Guidance until now is a blessing, and guidance from now on, I need to continue to receive that blessing. I need to keep working on my own and receive God's grace. So I need to open myself up to His grace so He keeps me on the path going forward. And so they say this dua, رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَّدُنكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنتَ الْوَهَّابُ. There is in Mafatih al-Janan a dua under the name of Dua al-Adila. So you know Mafatih al-Janan is divided into three parts. The first section, the first third of Mafatih is all these du'as. That's where you find Dua Kumail and Joshan Kabir and Saghir and so many other du'as are there. So Dua al-Adila is there. However, Shaykh Abbas Qummi, he says that his teacher, Mirza Nuri, says that this dua is not a dua from the Imams. It's not a supplication. There's no evidence that it's come from the Imams. He's quite convinced that it's written by some wise alim, but it's not directly from the Ma'soom. In any case, the introduction is very beautiful and the content is good. And just because if it's wisdom, if it's true and it's good, then there's nothing wrong with reading it, but you have to read it not as a word of the Ma'soom, but just as a wise thing to read. But he gives a nice introduction to this whole idea. He says the phrase adila inda al-maut means, the translator has used a very difficult, I've never heard this word before, tergiversation at death. So I think it's a Christian kind of theological term for turning away from faith, losing your faith at the end of life. Or turning one's back on one's faith and forsaking one's conviction in the last hour of life. How that happens is that Satan approaches the dying person and with his guile casts doubt into his heart to divest him of his faith. That is the reason why protection is sought against such an eventuality in the supplication. All right, so the introduction speaks to the idea and the kind of the danger of such a thing, and then the dua is there as well if you'd like to follow up and read that. All right, recite wa salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So with that, our discussion comes to the point of death, and now we transition over into the next realm, the realm of the barzakh. We'll talk about several aspects of the barzakh. One of the aspects is this wahsha. Right? The word wahsha, we mainly know it through salatul wahsha, but the whole reason why it's called salatul wahsha is because of the wahsha itself, that the recently deceased person feels. So wahsha is this intense loneliness, right? Solicitude, loneliness. Imagine maybe when you're homesick you might feel something like that. Right? You're away from home and you miss your family, you miss all your loved ones, and you just have this kind of aching in your heart because you want to be with someone that you know and that have all those emotions. So that's a sampling of what wahsha is. You long to be with people and you can't. Circumstances prevent you. So I'll share a couple of ahadith that speak to the kind of wahsha that is experienced by people in the grave. The first two hadith I'm going to share with you are from the two of the four great women. So if they're speaking like this of their fear of the wahsha that they're going to experience in their grave, then we have to think about our own state. So the first one is a hadith attributed to Isa ibn Maryam ala nabiyyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam, and a conversation that he has with his mother after her death. Right? He had the ability to raise the dead. Here he doesn't raise the dead, but he speaks to her and asks her if she wants to be raised. So in the hadith, Inna Isa nada ummahu Maryam ba'da wafatiha. After she dies, Isa alayhi salam goes to her grave and he speaks to her. He says, Ya ummah kallimini hal turidina an tarji'i ila dunya. Speak to me, he says, do you want to come back to this world? Qalat na'am. Maryam alayhi salam says, yes. Why? لأصلي لله في ليلة شديدة البرد وأصوم يوما شديد الحر. I wish to come back to fast, to pray one day, one night when it's intensely cold. Cold, painfully cold night when it's hard to wake up, it's hard to purify, clean yourself, and against all, every part of your nafs, you fight it and you wake up and you say a prayer. To be able to do that once, or to fast on one of those very long, hot days in the middle of the summer, right? To perform one more act of worship like this, I want to come back. She says, Ya bunayya fa inna at-tariqa makhuf. The path ahead, once you die, is a very frightful path. All right, so that's Maryam alayhi salam speaking from beyond the grave, literally beyond the grave, to tell us of what's to come, and that even she, after, we know what kind of life she lived. Her whole life was ibadah. She even forsook the comforts of life and marital life and all these sorts of things just to devote herself to ibadah her whole life. And even she, from beyond the grave, is saying that if only I could have done something more, because it's very hard on the other side. Another hadith that we have is a wasiyah. It's part of the wasiyah that Lady Fatima salamullahi alayha gave to Amir al-Mu'mineen before she died. إن فاطمة عليه السلام لما احتضرت أوصت عليا فقالت إذا أنا مت فتولى أنت غسلي وجهزني وصلي علي وأنزلني قبري وألحدني. She says that when I have died, then I want you, Abul Hassan, to take charge of my ghusl and all the preparations of my body. And then I want you to be the one to put me down into my grave and to place me in my lahad. Right? Lahad is that chamber that's at the bottom of the grave, dug sometimes on the side, sometimes at the bottom. So the person is placed into that kind of catacomb at the bottom of the grave. And then when the dirt goes down, it doesn't go down on the body itself. It goes kind of on the side. That's an additional way of honoring the person by creating a lahad in the grave. وَسَوِّتْ تُرَابَ عَلَيْهِ. And then put the dirt on my grave. And she says, وَاجْلِسْ عِنْدَ رَأْسِي قُبَالَةَ وَجْهِي. Then I want you to sit near the head of my grave, facing me. Right? So she's going to be facing the qibla, and so I want you to sit on that side of me where you're facing my face. فَأَكْثِرْ مِنْ تِلَاوَةِ الْقُرْآنِ وَالدُّعَاءِ. And she says, I want you to read Qur'an a lot and make dua a lot. فَإِنَّهَا سَاعَةٌ يَحْتَاجُ الْمَيِّتُ فِيهَا إِلَى أُنْسِ الْأَحْيَاءِ. Because, she says, my father has taught me that this is a time when the dead long for the company of those who are still living. Right? So she wants him to be there with her, not to leave her right away, to keep her company. She's in that wahsha state where she's so lonely, so separated from her loved ones, and she wants her most beloved to be there next to her and to continue to do this ibadah and worship and be there with her to provide this uns, this kind of company and good feeling, because she will be in the grave. With regard to the Salatul Wahsha, we have the general directions for how to perform it. I want to share another hadith. I think some weeks ago, maybe Shaykh Faizi also mentioned this hadith, and so it behooves us to revisit this. So in this hadith, this is another formulation for how to do Salatul Wahsha. Salatul Wahsha is a prayer, 2 rak'ah prayer, which is offered, it's referred to in ahadith as hadiyatul mayyit. It's a gift that we are giving to the recently deceased person. And so it's a salah that we're offering them as a way to alleviate their wahsha, to get rid of their wahsha. Right? That's the idea. Uns is the opposite of wahsha. Closeness and familiarity and having company is on one hand, and wahsha is the opposite of that. So this goes back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman is the one who narrates it. And he's also a very special person. He's one of those people who was always one of the Khawariyun of Imam Ali salam. In the list, when we say irtadda an-nas illa thalathan aw arba'an, that except for 3 or 4 people, everyone else turned away from Imam Ali. Hudhayfa is in that list. Right? After Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, Ammar, Hudhayfa, these are people who are at that top of the list of people who stood by him through thick and thin. And one of the indications of Hudhayfa's incredible character is that in the Battle of Uhud, his father, Yaman, he was elderly and he almost didn't join. He was too old, he didn't have to. But he says, it's a shame, I have nothing left of my life to live. I have to die anyway. Why not die in the path of God? And so late, he comes to the battlefield. After the army's already gone to the north of Medina for Uhud, then he joins the next morning and he asks Rasulullah, can I join? And so he joins, and at the time when the tides turn, remember that the Muslims very quickly defeat the mushrikeen, but because they become very greedy for booty and they lay down their weapons and they start just collecting, and it gives a chance for Khalid bin Walid to round the mountain and charge them from the back. So in that, the Muslims become sandwiched. And Khalid and his 200 horsemen come from one side, from the back. The mushrikeen who had been fleeing, they also turn around, pick up their arms and come back. And so now the Muslims become kind of crushed in between. And there's total chaos. And it becomes so chaotic that actually we have reports of several Muslims being killed by other Muslims. So this Yaman is one of them. Some of the fellow Muslims, not recognizing who he is, they go and they kill him. And Hudhayfa sees from a distance that you're killing my father. He says, Abi, he's my father, but it's too late, he's already killed. So after the battle, Rasulullah has to kind of figure out what to do with this mess. Muslims have killed Muslims. So he says that those who have killed, they're not liable, personally liable for this. It was a mistake, and they were fighting for the sake of God, but they ended up killing somebody. The diya, the blood money for the people who were killed, will be paid for by Baytul Mal. From the booty, that will be paid to the heirs of the person who was killed. So he solves it like that. This Hudhayfa is so magnanimous, he actually prays for those who killed his father. And he forgives them and says that I have no grudge against you. What you did was for the sake of God. You made a mistake. And he's so magnanimous and so merciful with the people who did this. He really shows the kind of faith that he had. And it shows he's one of those people who, through thick and thin, sticks with Imam Ali alayhi salam. So Hudhayfa is the one who's narrating this from Rasulullah. Rasulullah says, لا يأتي على الميت ساعة أشد من أول ليلة. No moment in the existence of the dead person is more severe than that first night that they spend in their grave. فَارْحَمُوا مَوْتَاكُمْ بِالصَّدَقَةِ. He says, so show mercy to your deceased people by giving sadaqah for them. This is something that I don't know how much we do this in our communities. It seems, at least the public face of it, is that typically when we want to do something for the dead, we typically will recite a Fatiha, or we will do a majlis, or there's certain things that culturally people will do, and that's the standard go-to for what to do for the dead, for their benefit. But the priority that the Prophet is giving is for sadaqah. Right? To give charity in their name. Charity and give the reward to that person. That's the way you can help them. That's the way you can show mercy to your dead. فَإِن لَمْ تَجِدُوا فَلْيُصَلِّ أَحَدُكُمْ. If you can't afford sadaqah, if you can't give it, then comes the time for Salatul Wahsha. Right? So the hadith formulation doesn't say when they die on the first night, pray Salatul Wahsha. It says give sadaqah as much as you can in their name for their benefit and for Allah's mercy on them. And when you can't do that, then the least you can do is pray Salatul Wahsha. And so he gives a formulation which is slightly different. In this one, instead of Surah Al-Qadr 10 times, he says Surah Al-Takathur 10 times. Which content-wise makes more sense because it's Al-Hakum Al-Takathur Hatta Zurtum Al-Maqabir. It's talking about death and visiting the graves, and kind of, it's more appropriate than Inna Anzalna in terms of meaning. So anyway, this is a different formulation of the Salatul Wahsha, but the one that is in the fiqh manuals that we're told is the way that we should do it, is the one that you all know, where it's Fatiha and Ayatul Kursi, all 3 verses of Ayatul Kursi in the first rak'ah, and then Fatiha and 10 times Surah Al-Qadr in the second rak'ah. And then at the end you say, Allah give the reward for these 2 rak'at to the soul of so-and-so. You mention the person's name. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Help us, Allah, to prepare for our deaths. Help us to solidify our faith, and help us to always be very conscious and very nurturing of our faith so that it's always strong. And inshallah, protect us from al-adila inda al-maut, that our faith not be lost at the time of death. Otherwise, our whole existence will be for nothing. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام على الأئمة الهادين المهديين. السلام على جميع أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.